Hello, and welcome to my presentation. My name is Nick Collins, and this presentation is about medical marijuana within hospitality. To start off, in 2025, there are 40 states within the U.S. that medical marijuana is legal in, and it means that for the majority of the U.S., a lot of these states are having to deal with new hires that use marijuana medically or recreationally. And in the state of Nevada specifically, marijuana is legal for both medical and recreational use. And for this reason, it is unlawful for an employer to refuse the hire of a prospective employee based on the result of a drug test that shows that they have positive results for marijuana. And there are many issues with accommodating medical marijuana use on the job, and whether it is to be considered an accommodation or undue hardship for the employer. And there are also many legal nuances that must be examined in order to get a clear picture on the laws surrounding medical marijuana within employment law today, and more specifically, how these laws apply to hospitality. Moving on to the federal laws, marijuana is not federally legal, and under federal law, marijuana is still considered a Schedule I drug. Under federal law, marijuana is considered to be the same tier of drug as opioids, hallucinogens, depressants, and also stimulants. And federal employees are strictly banned from using any Schedule I substance, including marijuana, and this includes medical or recreational use. And when it comes to state laws, more specifically Nevada, the Assembly Bill number 132 from the Nevada Office of the Labor Commissioner that became effective January 1st, 2020 states that it is unlawful for any employer in the state to fail or refuse to hire a prospective employee because of the prospective employee submitted to a screening test, and the results of the screening test indicate the presence of marijuana. And in Nevada, it is unlawful to use positive test results for marijuana as a reason to not hire someone. And these laws do only apply to people in jobs that are not safety critical. And if the job is seen as safety critical, then the use of medical marijuana can be used as a reason for not hiring the employee. Continuing on with how medical marijuana relates to ADA, the Americans with Disability Act prohibits discrimination in the workplace based on an employee's disability, and the ADA also states that the employer must provide reasonable accommodations for any employee with a disability. And the use of medical marijuana on the job can result in some legal issues based on the job function as well as the surrounding circumstances. And employers must attempt to make reasonable accommodations in order to accommodate medical marijuana use. However, since medical marijuana is not federally legal, these accommodations are not mandated under federal law. When it comes to medical marijuana and on-the-job use, there are many jobs where the use of marijuana on the job would not be able to be reasonably accommodated. Looking at a hotel front desk agent, for example, this is a customer-facing job where the employee must be focused and personable in order to perform their job efficiently. For a front desk agent, reasonable accommodations for medical marijuana use would be difficult. There is a level of professionalism expected from these employees, and for this reason, if the employee feels that they are unable to provide the type of service required, they do not have to accommodate the use of medical marijuana. The ways that medical marijuana use will impact our operation is that medical marijuana is going to be a constant that must be dealt with in a legal and proper way. There will be individuals that apply for positions within the company that possess a medical marijuana card, and the employees of the company are not federally employed by us. Therefore, marijuana showing up on the standard pre-hire drug test will not be a deciding factor whether or not to employ the individual, and reasonable accommodations for medical marijuana use must be attempted by us. When it comes to pre-employment, prior to the employment of an individual, a drug test will be mandatory, and the results of this drug test may be used to make a decision on hiring the individual as long as marijuana is not the contributing factor. A drug test that includes marijuana is allowed, however, the results of the marijuana portion of the test will not be used in the hiring decision by us. And once we have employed an individual, while an individual with a medical marijuana card is employed, reasonable accommodations must be attempted. If these accommodations are unjust, they do not have to be made legally, and if a drug test must be administered after an event that has occurred, the positive result of marijuana must not be used against the individual. And when it comes to termination, if having to terminate an individual with a medical marijuana accommodation, the reason for the termination must not be about the marijuana use, The reason for the termination must be justified and clear to the individual to avoid any legal complications. If the employee tests positive for multiple substances on an administered drug test post incident, they must be informed of the drugs that are leading to their termination, excluding marijuana. In conclusion, medical marijuana in employment law is an ever evolving legal landscape, and as laws continue to be enacted, changes will continue to occur. And in Nevada specifically, an employer is not allowed to base their hiring decision of an employee solely because marijuana is showing up on their drug test. An employer must also attempt to make reasonable accommodations under the Americans with Disability Act with medical marijuana possession and use within working hours. And marijuana, as it relates to employment law, continues to be a controversial topic, and it must also be handled with the greatest care in order to avoid any legal issues. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation about medical marijuana within hospitality, and I hope that this presentation offered you some insights for a company with hiring decisions moving forward.